Jason Thompson had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a small town far from the glitz and glamour of big cities, he spent most of his childhood reading adventure books and imagining himself exploring vast oceans or racing across shimmering lakes. But life had its own plans for Jason. Instead of becoming an explorer like the heroes in his favorite novels, he found himself working a steady 9-to-5 job at a local tech company. Still, deep down, Jason never let go of his love for adventure. He promised himself that one day he'd find a way to bring some excitement into his otherwise ordinary life. That promise came true when Jason discovered jet skis. It all started with a coworker who invited him on a weekend trip to Lake Pleasant, a popular spot just outside their city. When Jason arrived, he was greeted by the sight of sparkling blue water surrounded by lush greenery. The air smelled fresh, carrying hints of pine and wildflowers. His friend rented a jet ski for the afternoon, and after some initial hesitation, Jason climbed aboard. Within minutes, he was hooked. Zipping across the water felt like flying, free, exhilarating, and utterly liberating. For the first time in years, Jason felt alive. From that moment on, owning a jet ski became Jason's ultimate goal. He began researching different models, reading reviews, and saving every extra penny he could spare. It wasn't easy. There were times when he had to skip dinners out with friends or pass up on trendy gadgets everyone else seemed to want. But Jason didn't care. Every dollar saved brought him closer to his dream. Finally, after nearly 2 years of patience and determination, Jason walked into a dealership and purchased the jet ski of his dreams. A sleek, high-performance model painted in glossy black with sharp red accents. It was beautiful, powerful, and everything he'd ever imagined. Bringing the jet ski home felt surreal. Jason lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled near a large reservoir, making it the perfect location for someone who loved water sports. His house sat on a corner lot with a spacious backyard, giving him plenty of room to store the jet ski on a trailer during the off-season. This setup not only saved him money, renting storage space at the marina would have cost a fortune, but also allowed him to keep his prized possession close by. Jason spent hours tinkering with the jet ski, cleaning it meticulously, and even adding custom decals to make it uniquely his own. Life couldn't have been better, or so Jason thought. Little did he know, trouble was brewing right under his nose. Like many suburban neighborhoods, Jason's community operated under strict guidelines set by the Homeowners Association, HOA. These rules covered everything from lawn maintenance to acceptable paint colors for houses. One particular regulation caught Jason's attention. Recreational vehicles, including trailers, could only remain parked on driveways for up to 72 hours, before needing to be moved or stored elsewhere. Jason understood the reasoning behind the rule. No one wanted to see rusty RVs or dilapidated boats cluttering up the streets. So, to stay compliant, he developed a routine. Every few days, he'd move the trailer around his property, ensuring it never stayed in one spot long enough to raise eyebrows. It was a simple solution that worked well, until Karen Peterson entered the picture. Karen lived 2 doors down from Jason and had earned a reputation as the neighborhood's unofficial enforcer of HOA rules. Everyone knew her name, though not always fondly. She prided herself on knowing every line of the HOA handbook inside and out, often taking it upon herself to report even minor infractions. Whether it was reminding neighbors to trim overgrown bushes or sending passive-aggressive notes about holiday decorations left up too long, Karen made sure everyone followed the rules or faced the consequences. Despite Karen's meddling nature, Jason tried to avoid conflict. He figured if he kept his head down and adhered to the guidelines, she'd leave him alone. Unfortunately, fate had other ideas. On a bright Saturday morning, while Jason was away running errands, Karen happened to glance out her window and spotted the jet ski trailer sitting quietly in Jason's driveway. Though it hadn't been there long enough to violate the 72-hour limit, Karen decided it was unsightly and against the spirit of the HOA guidelines. In her mind, rules weren't suggestions. They were laws meant to be enforced without exception. What happened next would change Jason's life forever. Without consulting the HOA board or giving Jason any warning, Karen took matters into her own hands. She picked up the phone and called a towing company she frequently worked with, claiming the jet ski was abandoned and blocking access to the street. It was a bold-faced lie, but Karen convinced herself it was justified. After all, she believed she was doing what was best for the neighborhood, even if no one else appreciated her efforts. As the tow truck rolled up to Jason's house, Karen watched from her porch with a smug smile. She told herself she was protecting the community's aesthetic and maintaining order. What she didn't realize, however, was that her actions would unleash a chain reaction of events that would spiral far beyond anything she could have anticipated. And poor Jason? He had no idea what awaited him when he returned home later that afternoon. Karen Peterson was not your average neighbor. To some, she might have seemed like just another resident of the quiet suburban neighborhood, a middle-aged woman with neatly styled hair, a penchant for floral dresses, and an immaculately manicured lawn. But to those who knew her better, or rather had crossed paths with her over trivial disputes, Karen was something else entirely, the self-appointed guardian of the HOA rulebook. Her dedication to enforcing every guideline, no matter how small, bordered on obsession. Neighbors whispered about her behind closed doors, calling her HOA Karen as both a nickname and a warning. Karen's reputation wasn't built overnight. She first gained notoriety when she reported a family for having mismatched curtains visible through their living room window. The incident became infamous in the neighborhood because it highlighted Karen's unique ability to find fault where others saw none. Over time, similar stories emerged. A teenager received a stern letter from the HOA after parking his bike too close to the curb. Another household was fined for leaving their garbage cans out past collection day. Each episode added another layer to Karen's infamy, cementing her status as someone you didn't want to cross. Despite her polarizing nature, Karen genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. In her mind, rules existed for a reason: to maintain order, preserve property values, and ensure the community remained a pleasant place to live. She prided herself on being vigilant, often patrolling the streets early in the morning or late in the afternoon, clipboard in hand, ready to document any infractions. If Karen spotted even the slightest deviation from the HOA guidelines, she wasted no time reporting it. Rarely did she bother consulting the actual board members. Instead, she took matters into her own hands, confident that her interpretation of the rules aligned perfectly with what was best for everyone. Jason Thompson, however, hadn't given Karen much thought until now. He lived 2 doors down, keeping mostly to himself and focusing on maintaining his home and yard. Jason's property was tidy but unremarkable, nothing that would draw unwanted attention. That changed once he brought home the jet ski. While Jason made sure to follow the 72-hour driveway rule by occasionally moving the trailer around his property, Karen still found issue with its presence. To her, the jet ski represented everything she disliked about lax enforcement: noise, clutter, and a disruption of the neighborhood's serene atmosphere. On that fateful Saturday morning, Karen stood at her kitchen sink, sipping coffee while gazing out the window. From this vantage point, she could see Jason's driveway and the jet ski trailer parked there. Though Jason had moved it multiple times during the week, Karen decided it was time to take action. In her mind, the trailer had overstayed its welcome, regardless of whether it technically violated the HOA rules. Besides, she reasoned, if she let one person bend the guidelines, soon everyone else would start doing the same. Chaos would ensue, and the pristine appearance of the neighborhood would crumble. With determination burning in her eyes, Karen reached for her phone and dialed the number of a towing company she frequently collaborated with. They weren't strangers. Karen had used them before to remove abandoned cars or improperly parked vehicles from the street. This time, though, she stretched the truth to fit her narrative. "There's a jet ski trailer blocking access to the road," she told the operator, her tone authoritative yet casual. "It looks abandoned. Can you come tow it away?" The operator hesitated briefly. "Are you sure it's abandoned? We'll need proof before we can remove it." Karen brushed off the concern with practiced ease. "Absolutely sure. It's been sitting there for days. Trust me, I've been watching." Satisfied with her response, the operator agreed to send a truck Over within the hour. Hanging up, Karen allowed herself a satisfied smile. She imagined Jason returning home to find the trailer gone, perhaps learning a valuable lesson about respecting HOA regulations. In her mind, this was justice served, a necessary step to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. What Karen failed to consider, however, were the consequences of bypassing proper channels and acting without consent. Meanwhile, Jason remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing back at his house. After finishing his errands, he stopped by a local cafe for lunch, savoring a sandwich and scrolling through social media on his phone. Occasionally, his thoughts drifted to the jet ski waiting for him at home. He pictured himself speeding across the reservoir later that evening, wind rushing past his face, water spraying beneath him. The idea filled him with excitement, a welcome escape from the monotony of daily life. Back at Jason's house, the tow truck arrived right on schedule. Two burly workers stepped out, glancing around cautiously before approaching the trailer. One of them scratched his head, clearly puzzled. "You sure this is abandoned?" he asked his partner. "Looks pretty new." "Hey, we're just following orders," the other replied with a shrug. "If the lady says it's abandoned, then it's abandoned." Without further discussion, they hooked the trailer to the truck and prepared to haul it away. But as fate would have it, disaster struck almost immediately. During the loading process, something went terribly wrong. Whether it was human error, faulty equipment, or simply bad luck, the straps holding the jet ski in place snapped. With a loud crash, the jet ski tumbled off the trailer and onto the pavement below. The impact was devastating. The sleek machine Jason had worked so hard to save for lay mangled and broken. Its fiberglass hull cracked, the engine dented, and various components scattered across the ground. The workers exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. They quickly radioed the office to report the accident, hoping to mitigate the fallout. Still, the damage was done. Jason's prized possession was ruined, all because of Karen's impulsive decision to call in the tow truck without proper authorization. Unbeknownst to anyone, this single act of recklessness would set off a chain reaction of events that would ripple through the entire neighborhood. For now, though, Karen remained oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. Sitting comfortably in her living room, she congratulated herself on a job well done, convinced that she had acted in the best interest of the community. Little did she know her actions would soon ignite a firestorm of controversy, pitting neighbor against neighbor and forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about fairness, accountability, and the true meaning of community spirit. When Jason finally pulled into his driveway later that afternoon, the scene before him was nothing short of surreal. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across his yard, but something felt off. His eyes darted to the spot where the jet ski trailer should have been parked, a void now occupied only by faint tire marks on the asphalt. For a moment, he stood frozen, staring at the empty space as if willing the jet ski to reappear. It didn't. Confusion quickly gave way to panic as Jason scrambled to figure out what had happened. He glanced around the driveway, half expecting to see some clue, a note, a misplaced item, anything that might explain the sudden disappearance. That's when he noticed it. A crumpled piece of paper taped haphazardly to his front door. With trembling hands, he peeled it off and unfolded it. The message was brief, handwritten in blocky letters. "Your jet ski trailer has been towed for violating HOA rules. Contact Towing Solutions, Inc. for retrieval." Jason's stomach sank. He read the note again, his mind racing. Violating HOA rules? He hadn't left the trailer out longer than allowed. He was certain of it. More importantly, why hadn't anyone contacted him first? Why go straight to towing without so much as a warning? None of this made sense. Determined to get answers, Jason grabbed his phone and dialed the number listed on the note. A bored-sounding receptionist answered after several rings. After explaining the situation, Jason learned two shocking details. The tow had been arranged not by the HOA board, but by an individual claiming authority, and during transportation, the jet ski had fallen off the trailer due to improper securing. "What? Do you mean it fell?" Jason demanded, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. "How does something like that even happen? The receptionist hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir, but there was an accident while loading your property onto the truck. The straps, they snapped. We're investigating exactly how it happened, but I can tell you the damage is significant." Significant? Jason's heart pounded as he pressed for more information. Eventually, the receptionist reluctantly agreed to send over photos of the wreckage. When the images arrived moments later, Jason nearly dropped his phone. What he saw wasn't just damage, it was destruction. The once pristine jet ski lay in pieces, its sleek design reduced to a twisted heap of fiberglass and metal. The hull was cracked wide open, exposing the internal mechanisms. Parts of the engine appeared crushed, and one of the handlebars was bent at an unnatural angle. It looked less like a recreational vehicle, and more like debris from a car crash. Jason slumped against the side of his house, overwhelmed by disbelief and anger. How could this have happened? Who had authorized such reckless behavior? And most importantly, who would pay for the repairs, or worse, replacement, of his beloved jet ski? The questions swirled in his head, each one fueling his growing frustration. This wasn't just about money, it was about fairness, respect, and accountability. Someone had crossed a line, and Jason intended to find out exactly who, and hold them responsible. Confronting Karen. The next morning, Jason marched straight to Karen's house, his fists clenched and his jaw set. He knocked firmly on her door, ignoring the butterflies fluttering in his stomach. Moments later, Karen opened the door, her expression shifting from mild surprise to defensive irritation as soon as she recognized him. "Can I help you?" she asked curtly, folding her arms across her chest. "You can start by explaining why my jet ski was towed," Jason shot back, holding up the crumpled note. "And don't play dumb. I know you called the towing company." Karen blinked, caught, off guard for a split second before recovering her composure. "Well, someone had to do something," she said, her tone dripping with self-righteousness. "That trailer was sitting in your driveway for days, ruining the look of the neighborhood. You can't just leave things like that out indefinitely." "It wasn't there for days," Jason countered, his voice rising. "I moved it regularly, exactly like the HOA rules say. Did you even check before calling the tow truck?" Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Rules are rules, Jason. If you'd taken better care to follow them, none of this would have happened." Her nonchalant attitude only fueled Jason's fury. "Follow them? Are you serious right now? You bypassed the entire HOA process and took matters into your own hands. Not only that, but your little stunt wrecked my jet ski. Do you have any idea what it cost me? Or how much it means to me?" For the first time, Karen faltered, her confidence wavering slightly. "Wrecked? What are you talking about?" "Oh, you didn't hear?" Jason sneered. "Your precious towing company dropped it on the road. It's completely destroyed. Congratulations. You've officially ruined something that was supposed to bring me joy." Karen's face flushed red, though whether from guilt or indignation was hard to tell. "That's not my fault," she snapped. "If you'd kept it stored properly, none of this would have happened. Stop trying to blame me for your mistakes." At that point, their argument drew the attention of nearby neighbors. A small crowd began gathering on the sidewalk, whispering among themselves as they watched the heated exchange unfold. Some looked sympathetic toward Jason, shaking their heads at Karen's audacity. Others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whose side to take. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, turning what should have been a private dispute into a public spectacle. The fallout. As news of the incident traveled, opinions divided sharply. On one side were those who sided with Jason, outraged by Karen's heavy-handed tactics and lack of remorse. Many felt she had overstepped her bounds, acting as judge, jury, and executioner without consulting the HOA board or giving Jason a chance to address the alleged violation. Her decision to call the towing company directly struck many as reckless and vindictive. On the other side were Karen's defenders, a smaller but vocal group who believed she was simply doing her duty. To them, Jason's jet ski represented a blatant disregard for community standards, and Karen's actions, while perhaps extreme, were justified in preserving the neighborhood's aesthetic. One neighbor even commented, "If we let people bend the rules whenever they feel like it, where does it end?" The tension reached a boiling point when Jason posted his story online. Seeking advice and support, he turned to Reddit, specifically the subreddit r/just-no-HOA, known for sharing tales of HOA horror stories and offering practical solutions. His post, titled, "HOA Karen tows my jet ski from my property and destroys it," quickly gained traction. Within hours, thousands of users weighed in, expressing outrage over Karen's actions and offering words of encouragement to Jason. Redditors urged Jason to escalate the matter, suggesting he file a formal complaint with the HOA board and pursue legal action against both Karen and the towing company. Many shared similar experiences, recounting their own battles with overzealous neighbors or uncooperative HOAs. Some provided links to resources for navigating disputes, while others offered moral support, reminding Jason that he wasn't alone in fighting this kind of injustice. But the online reaction wasn't limited to Reddit. As Jason's story went viral, local news outlets picked up on the controversy, further amplifying the drama. Reporters descended on the neighborhood, interviewing residents and capturing footage of the damaged jet ski. The media coverage added another layer of pressure, forcing everyone involved to confront the consequences of their actions. Back in the neighborhood, the atmosphere grew tense. Conversations at the mailbox or over backyard fences became awkward, tinged with unease. Friendships frayed as neighbors chose sides, and the once peaceful community found itself embroiled in conflict. Jason, meanwhile, resolved to fight back, not just for himself but for the principle of fairness. He refused to let Karen's actions go unchecked, determined to prove that no one, not even the self-proclaimed enforcer of the HOA, was above accountability. Though the path ahead promised to be challenging, Jason knew he couldn't back down. With mounting evidence, growing public support, and renewed determination, he prepared to take the next step, seeking justice through official channels. Whatever the outcome, one thing was clear: the quiet suburban neighborhood would never be the same again. The aftermath of the jet ski incident left Jason with a mix of emotions: anger, frustration, and a burning desire to set things right. He knew that simply confronting Karen wasn't enough. She had shown no remorse for her actions, and her refusal to take responsibility only fueled his determination to hold her accountable. But Jason also realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. The viral attention his story received on Reddit and local news outlets had transformed it into something bigger, a rallying cry against overreach by HOAs and individuals who wielded power recklessly. Jason decided to take the advice he'd received from the online community. Armed with screenshots of supportive comments, legal resources shared by Redditors, and a growing list of neighbors willing to testify on his behalf, he began drafting a formal complaint to the HOA board. This wasn't going to be a casual email or phone call. It was a meticulously crafted document outlining every detail of the situation: Karen's unauthorized decision to tow the jet ski, the negligence of the towing company, and the resulting damage. Jason included copies of the HOA guidelines, highlighting the sections that proved he had followed the rules. He even attached photos of the wrecked jet ski as evidence of the catastrophic outcome of Karen's actions. Submitting the complaint felt like a weight lifting off his shoulders, but Jason knew the fight was far from over. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting to address the issue, inviting both Jason and Karen to present their sides. Word of the meeting spread quickly through the neighborhood, drawing widespread interest. Residents whispered about it during morning walks, debated it at dinner tables, and speculated about its potential outcomes. Some saw it as an opportunity for justice, while others feared it might deepen the rift between neighbors. On the day of the meeting, Jason arrived early, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. He wanted to make a good impression, not just on the board members but on everyone watching. The room was packed, filled with curious neighbors eager to witness the showdown firsthand. Cameras from local news crews lined the walls, adding to the tension. When Karen entered shortly afterward, her usual air of confidence seemed slightly diminished. She glanced around nervously, perhaps sensing the weight of the scrutiny she was under. The meeting began with the HOA president laying out the ground rules. Each party would have 10 minutes to present their case, followed by questions from the board. Jason went first, speaking calmly but firmly as he recounted the events leading up to the towing and subsequent destruction of his jet ski. He emphasized how Karen had bypassed proper procedures, acting independently without consulting the board or giving him any warning. "This isn't just about my property," Jason said, looking directly at the board members. "It's about fairness and accountability. If someone can take matters into their own hands like this, what's stopping them from doing it again?" When it was Karen's turn to speak, she defended herself vigorously. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood," she insisted, her voice tinged with defensiveness. "If I hadn't done something, that trailer would still be sitting there ruining the curb appeal." She tried to shift the blame onto Jason, accusing him of being careless despite knowing the rules. However, her arguments fell flat when confronted with Jason's documentation proving compliance. Several board members exchanged skeptical looks, clearly unimpressed by Karen's attempts to justify her behavior. After both presentations, the floor opened for questions. One board member asked Karen why she hadn't reported the alleged violation to the HOA instead of calling the towing company directly. She stammered, unable to provide a satisfactory answer. Another questioned whether she had verified the 72-hour rule before taking action. Again, Karen struggled to respond coherently. Meanwhile, Jason fielded questions confidently, pointing to his records and offering testimony from neighbors who confirmed they had seen him move the trailer regularly. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear which way the tide was turning. Many attendees expressed sympathy for Jason, shaking their heads in disbelief at Karen's actions. Even some of her supporters began to waver, questioning whether her zeal for enforcing rules had crossed a line. By the time the board adjourned to deliberate, the atmosphere in the room felt charged with anticipation. Taking legal action. While waiting for the HOA's decision, Jason didn't sit idle. Encouraged by the overwhelming support he'd received online and offline, he decided to pursue legal action against Karen and the towing company. With help from a lawyer recommended by one of the Redditors, he filed a lawsuit seeking compensation for the full cost of repairing or replacing the jet, many damages. His attorney argued that Karen's reckless behavior constituted negligence, while the towing company bore liability for improperly securing the jet ski during transport. The lawsuit added another layer of pressure to an already tense situation. Karen, once so self-assured, now appeared visibly shaken. Neighbors reported seeing her pacing anxiously in her yard, avoiding eye contact with anyone who approached. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the magnitude of the consequences her actions had unleashed. Meanwhile, the HOA board reconvened days later to announce their verdict. In a unanimous decision, they sided with Jason, issuing a formal apology for Karen's unauthorized intervention and promising to implement stricter protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. They also issued a written reprimand to Karen, warning her that further violations of HOA procedures could result in penalties, including fines or suspension of her voting rights within the association. Though the ruling was a victory for Jason, it didn't fully resolve the emotional toll of the ordeal. The jet ski, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, now sat in pieces in a repair shop, awaiting restoration. More importantly, the trust Jason had once placed in his community had been fractured. He couldn't help but feel betrayed by Karen's actions and disheartened by the divisions her behavior had sown among neighbors. Still, Jason refused to let bitterness consume him. Instead, he channeled his energy into rebuilding, not just his jet ski, but also his relationships with those around him. Slowly, life in the neighborhood began to return to normal. Conversations resumed, fences mended, and tensions eased. While some animosity lingered, particularly toward Karen, most residents recognized the importance of finding common ground and moving forward together. For Karen, the fallout was more severe. Once a polarizing figure, she now found herself increasingly isolated. Her reputation, already tarnished by years of micromanaging, plummeted further in the wake of the scandal. Neighbors avoided her, and invitations to social gatherings dried up. Though she continued to live in the community, her influence waned significantly, leaving her to reflect on the cost of her rigid adherence to rules at the expense of compassion and understanding. As for Jason, he emerged from the experience stronger and wiser. The ordeal taught him valuable lessons about standing up for himself, seeking justice, and navigating conflicts with grace. And though the road ahead promised challenges, he remained hopeful that the neighborhood, and perhaps even Karen, could learn from the incident and grow into a more harmonious, empathetic community. A new chapter. Months later, Jason finally retrieved his repaired jet ski from the shop. It gleamed under the sunlight, restored to its former glory thanks to the settlement he'd won in court. As he wheeled it back into his driveway, he couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also been transformative. What started as a personal grievance had sparked a broader conversation about fairness, accountability, and the true meaning of community spirit. Jason revved the engine, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation as he prepared to hit the water. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to forget the drama and focus solely on the joy of riding. As the jet ski sped across the reservoir, leaving ripples in its wake, Jason knew one thing for certain: no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always find a way to keep moving forward. The courtroom was quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional shuffle of papers. Jason sat at a table with his lawyer, trying to steady his breathing. Months of preparation had led to this moment, the culmination of his fight for justice against Karen and the towing company. Across the aisle, Karen looked visibly uneasy, her usual confidence replaced by an air of nervousness. She glanced around the room, perhaps realizing for the first time how isolated she had become. The judge entered, calling the court to order, and the proceedings began. Jason's lawyer opened the case with a clear and compelling argument. He outlined every step of the incident: Karen's unauthorized decision to call the towing company, the improper handling of the jet ski during transport, and the resulting damage. Evidence was presented in meticulous detail: photos of the wrecked jet ski, copies of HOA guidelines showing Jason's compliance, and testimonies from neighbors who confirmed that Jason had regularly moved the trailer as required. The lawyer emphasized that Karen's actions were not only reckless, but also violated basic principles of fairness and accountability. When it was Karen's turn to defend herself, her arguments came across as weak and defensive. Her attorney tried to shift blame onto Jason, suggesting he should have anticipated potential issues with the HOA rules. But the judge wasn't convinced. When asked why she hadn't followed proper procedures or consulted the HOA board before taking action, Karen struggled to provide a coherent answer. It was clear to everyone in the room that her impulsive behavior had caused unnecessary harm. The towing company fared no better. Their representatives admitted fault in improperly securing the jet ski, acknowledging that their negligence directly contributed to the accident. They offered partial compensation, hoping to settle out of court. But Jason's lawyer pushed back, arguing that full restitution was necessary, given the extent of the damage. After hours of testimony and deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Both Karen and the towing company were found liable for the destruction of Jason's jet ski. The court ordered them to pay for the full cost of repairs, or replacement if restoration proved impossible, as well as additional damages to cover emotional distress and legal fees. For Jason, it was a hard-won victory. Justice had been served, but the scars of the ordeal remained. Rebuilding trust. With the lawsuit resolved, Jason turned his attention to repairing more than just his jet ski. The incident had left deep divisions within the neighborhood, pitting neighbor against neighbor and straining relationships that once felt unbreakable. While some residents admired Jason's determination to hold Karen accountable, others still harbored resentment, believing the drama could have been avoided altogether. The community, once united by shared values and camaraderie, now felt fractured. Determined to mend fences, Jason took proactive steps to rebuild trust. He started small, inviting neighbors over for casual barbecues and weekend gatherings. At these events, he made a conscious effort to engage with those who had supported him as well as those who hadn't. Conversations ranged from light-hearted topics like upcoming holidays to heavier discussions about the importance of communication and empathy within the community. Slowly but surely, tensions began to ease. One breakthrough came during a neighborhood meeting called by the HOA board. In response to the jet ski controversy, the board proposed new measures aimed at preventing similar conflicts in the future. These included stricter oversight of towing requests, mandatory notifications to homeowners before any enforcement actions, and clearer guidelines for reporting violations. During the discussion, several neighbors praised Jason for bringing attention to systemic flaws within the HOA process. Even some former critics acknowledged that his persistence had sparked positive change. Karen, however, remained largely absent from these efforts. Since the trial, she had withdrawn further into herself, avoiding social interactions and rarely leaving her house. Rumors circulated that she regretted her actions, though she never publicly apologized to Jason or anyone else affected by the fallout. Her isolation became a cautionary tale for others, highlighting the dangers of prioritizing rigid adherence to rules over human connection and understanding. Despite Karen's absence, the neighborhood slowly regained its sense of unity. People began working together again on community projects, organizing block parties and collaborating on initiatives to beautify shared spaces. The jet ski incident served as a painful reminder of what could happen when trust eroded, but also as a catalyst for growth and reflection. Many residents emerged from the experience with a renewed commitment to balancing rules with compassion. A symbol of resilience. Weeks after the trial, Jason finally received word that his jet ski had been fully restored. Standing outside the repair shop, he inspected the gleaming machine, running his fingers along its smooth surface. Every scratch, dent, and crack had been meticulously repaired, leaving it looking almost brand new. As he hooked the jet ski back onto its trailer and drove home, a wave of satisfaction washed over him. The journey had been long and grueling, but he had persevered and come out stronger on the other side. That evening, Jason decided to celebrate by taking the jet ski out for a ride. Pulling into the reservoir parking lot, he noticed a few familiar faces gathered near the shore. Some of his neighbors had heard about the restoration and showed up to cheer him on. Smiling, Jason waved and thanked them before launching the jet ski into the water. As he sped across the surface, wind rushing past his face and spray kicking up behind him, Jason felt a profound sense of freedom. For so many months, his life had revolved around anger, frustration, and uncertainty. Now standing tall on the jet ski, he realized how far he'd come, not just legally, but emotionally. The battle had tested his patience, resilience, and faith in humanity, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about standing up for himself and finding strength in adversity. Back on shore, his neighbors clapped and cheered as Jason returned, their applause echoing across the water. One of them handed him a cold drink, raising a toast to new beginnings. Jason grinned, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the support he'd received, but for the opportunity to start fresh. The jet ski, once a symbol of conflict, now represented something entirely different: resilience, triumph, and hope. Lessons learned. In the weeks and months that followed, Jason reflected on everything that had transpired. The jet ski incident had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about authority, fairness, and the delicate balance between individual rights and community standards. He understood now that while rules existed for a reason, they couldn't override common sense or empathy. True harmony required compromise, open dialogue, and mutual respect, qualities that had been sorely lacking in his interactions with Karen. At the same time, Jason recognized the power of standing up for oneself. Had he chosen to stay silent? After discovering the wreckage of his jet ski, nothing would have changed. The HOA might have continued operating without accountability, and Karen's behavior could have gone unchecked. By speaking out, seeking justice, and enlisting the support of others, Jason had not only reclaimed what was rightfully his, but also inspired meaningful reform within the community. For Karen, the aftermath of the incident served as a stark lesson in humility. Though she never publicly apologized, her diminished presence in the neighborhood spoke volumes. Whether or not she truly regretted her actions, the experience undoubtedly reshaped her perspective. Perhaps in time, she would learn to temper her zeal for enforcing rules with a greater appreciation for the people those rules were meant to serve. Looking ahead, life in the neighborhood gradually returned to normal, though it was a new normal shaped by the lessons of the past. Jason continued enjoying his jet ski, often inviting friends and neighbors to join him on weekend rides. His willingness to forgive and move forward earned him newfound respect, solidifying his role as a pillar of the community. Meanwhile, the HOA implemented its revised policies, fostering a culture of transparency and collaboration. Though the scars of the incident wouldn't fade completely, they became part of the neighborhood's collective memory, a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. Jason's story resonated beyond the confines of the subdivision, inspiring others facing similar challenges to advocate for themselves and demand accountability. As the sun set over the reservoir one evening, casting golden ripples across the water, Jason stood on the dock watching the horizon. Behind him, laughter and chatter filled the air as neighbors enjoyed another gathering. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. The jet ski incident had been a defining chapter in his life, but it was just that, a chapter. And as he looked ahead, Jason knew there were countless adventures waiting to unfold, both on the water and off.